and doesn't. And does not, they claim they're trying, but
Alrighty, thank you all for coming tonight. We're going to go ahead and get this meeting rolling. I'm going to call it to order and ask you to all please stand for the Pledge of Allegiance. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Sally, if you could help us with the roll call, please.
Certainly. Alderpersons Danielle Henry.
Here.
Jim Barron.
Here.
Jackie Valdy.
Here.
Wayne Dean.
Here.
Matt Grimmer.
Here.
Phil Casson.
Here.
Tim Eicher.
Here.
And we also have Mayor Kent Atwell, City Attorney Hammes, and City Administrator and Director of Public Works Tom Hafner with us.
Great, thank you very much. All right, we're going to move on to item 4. We have a special order of business. We'll be swearing in 2 officers here. And if Officer Bennett can come on up. You could stand here. We do it this way so we can get the thing in the background. Sure. All righty. I, Michael Bennett, having been appointed as a police officer for the City of Delafield.
I, Michael Bennett, having been appointed as a police officer with the City of Delafield.
Hereby swear that I will support the Constitution of the United States.
Hereby swear that I will support the Constitution of the United States.
And the Constitution of the State of Wisconsin.
And the Constitution of the State of Wisconsin.
I will faithfully and impartially discharge the duties of said office to the best of my ability.
I will fairly and faithfully discharge the duties of the said office to the best of my ability.
So help me God.
So help me God.
Congratulations.
Thank you.
Welcome aboard. All right, you can sign the paper there for the clerk. And then we'll have Officer Williams come up.
Congratulations.
Okay.
Congratulations.
So for those of you that aren't aware, the tradition is when an officer is sworn in, they have someone special to them pin the badge on them for the first time. So Officer Bennett's having his wife.
She's already nervous, right?
Do we need to call the paramedics?
We're already on standby.
Thank you. Okay, Officer Williams. All righty. I, Kip Williams, having been appointed as a police officer for the City of Delafield.
I, Kip Williams, having been appointed a police officer of the City of Delafield.
Hereby swear that I will support the Constitution of the United States.
Hereby swear that I will support the Constitution of the United States.
And the Constitution of the State of Wisconsin.
And the Constitution of the State of Wisconsin.
And I will faithfully and impartially discharge the duties of said office to the best of my ability.
I will
Faithfully and impartially discharge the duties of the said office
the duties of the said office
to the best of my ability.
to the best of my ability.
So help me God.
So help me God.
Great, congratulations. Okay, we will move on to item number 5 on the agenda, approval of minutes of the May 17th, 2021 regular meeting.
Also move.
Well, second.
All right, all those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Abstentions? Passes. Okay, item number 6, City of Delafield citizens' comments. Who would like to come up and speak during citizens' comments? Come on up, Mr. Schuman. Just remind you, we have a lot of people in the audience today, so we'll be holding to 3 minutes, and you guys did a great job last time you were here being respectful of one another and the folks that are here, so let's keep up the good work. Mr. Schuman.
Respectfully, sis, okay. I thank you very much for the opportunity to speak on my behalf and behalf of the other citizens regarding the proposed development at the former Seven Seas location. One thing I learned is my 8 years as alderman, 2 years as mayor. The mind can absorb what the hinder can endure, so I'll keep my remarks short and sweet to help you with that. I am Philip Schuman, 1717 Nakawicka Road, City of Delafield, mailing address is Heartland. My house and lot are directly adjacent to the Seven Seas and the proposed development. I've endured the Seven Seas all these years. They were there when I moved, and I don't miss the noise and the other things now that are closed. Things change over time. Lots of commercial development on the city lake property has gone to residential. So I hope this happens also here. I had a realtor look at my property, and he also looked at the development which was proposed. And short and sweet, I would take a hit of about $50,000 of my sale of my property if this development proposed by Mr. Kiefer goes through. It's not like I have to buy a cheaper place in Boca or some other place. Unfortunately, about 18 months ago, my wife was diagnosed with a movement disorder called progressive supranuclear palsy, PSP for short. It's a form of Parkinson's. She will be needing nursing home care. We try to do this at home, and I hope to keep her at home and continue this and use maybe a reverse mortgage to help fund it. If the property next door becomes a CBRF, that will reduce the amount of money that I'm able to borrow. One of the other things, back in about 1998, Jack Weisgerber proposed a development of the Seven Seas to include what he called changing rooms. This is basically like a motel where brides and grooms could change. This was objected to by the neighbors, and they put an agreement in 1998 not to have these hotel types of rooms in the Seven Seas. That agreement is still valid as far as I know. So I don't like this 57-bed unit. The care in there is not nearly anything what my wife would need. We have a lovely place to stay as far as the care goes in her situation. And I hope you vote this down. The Plan Commission has already approved 3 residential lots at this location, and I love to see 3 lots in that location. So thank you very much for your service to the City of Delafield, and hopefully this is short enough we don't bend your ears too much. Thank you.
Perfect. Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Who'd like to be next? Mark?
Hi, Mark Schaefer, 2106 Evergreen Lane. Dozens of Delafield citizens raised concerns and objections about this proposal at the Plan Commission meeting. Out of respect for the Common Council's time, we're not going to repeat all those comments tonight. We simply ask for you to rely on our previous comments of record and emails. And if you would allow me 4 or 5 minutes to speak on behalf of a group of about 55 citizens, they've asked me to briefly list their top concerns and ask you to reject this proposal. And if I could just have a show of hands of those in our group that are represented here and are asking respectfully for rejection of this proposal. Number 1, a for-profit CBRF is very welcome here in Delafield, but the proposed size and location of the large commercial structure is not. Number two, we're concerned about the environmental impact of a 57-bed residential facility compared to the 3 single-family homes already approved for this property, including 70,000 square feet of impervious surface, tree removal, traffic, runoff, light pollution on the lake, etc. Number three, impact on infrastructure. Well water, sewer, emergency services. Who pays for the expansion required? Number four, and really important, our 2030 comprehensive plan. It requires that we preserve the character of existing neighborhoods. We prevent inappropriate overdevelopment of the lakefront. We discourage commercial uses on the lakefront. And we encourage high-density housing within walking distance of the city center. All very logical development guidelines. Number five, the city's citizens of Delafield raised concerns about the safety and support for CBRF residents, such as sidewalks for a safe place to walk, access to emergency services, hospitals, shopping, and the nearby public amenities, all needed by frail seniors. We were actually shocked that none of these items were even mentioned in Castle's proposal. Cost of community services. Have we considered how that compares for a 57-bed residential facility versus the 3 single-family homes that the city has already approved for this property? Our zoning regulations. Regardless of what is built there, our zoning regulations are clear. Building size, scale, and proportion shall be compatible with neighboring properties. Buildings shall not be so out of character with neighboring properties such as to impact property value. Lake residential areas are expected not to exceed 4 dwellings per acre. Questions were raised about the long-term viability of this type of business and the tax burden of potentially failed, empty, and otherwise unusable structure. 7 Seas is listed on MLS as a 17,000 square foot building. Castle is proposing a structure is nearly 3 times that size for the same property. They ask us to think of it as a single-family, home-like residence. Putting a 57-bed facility of tiny rooms in a single-family neighborhood does not make it home-like for the residents. And last but not least, the negative impact on property values. Let's take a minute to do a property value impact study. As homeowners, you're all qualified to do this because a home is worth exactly what a buyer is willing to pay for it. No more, no less. So let's say you'd like to buy a home on the lake in lovely Delafield, and I have 2 houses to sell you. House number 1, house number 2. They're both exactly in your price range. Both houses are very similar. In fact, about the only difference is house number 1 is a beautiful home surrounded by a neighborhood of very similar single-family homes. House number 2 is a beautiful home next door to a 57-bed residential facility. Now you get to pick one house or the other to buy. Which one will it be? And I know you're not here to answer any questions, but I think we all know that in front of me, I have 10 buyers for house number 1 and 0 buyers for house number 2. There's our property value study. Thanks for your time.
Thank you for
Thank
your
you.
comments. Who would like to be next? Are there any others? Come on up, sir.
Thank you. My name is Matt O'Neill. I represent Terry and Joyce Giles. And I'm here to give a little different perspective, and that is in 1998, when the 7 Seas was proposing a fairly major expansion, Mr. and Mrs. Giles, along with Tom and Carrie Shannon, appeared and objected to it because it was in violation of the law at the time. And in that context, Mr. Weisgerber took Mr. Giles and Mr. Shannon out in the hall, and he promised if they withdrew their objections to that 1998 expansion, he would promise never to put a larger structure on the property. And he agreed to put that in a covenant, and he agreed to sign that covenant, and it was filed on October 16th, 1998 as a covenant running with the land. So it applies to the current owners, it applies to the next owners. And that covenant states in part that as long as Mr. and Mrs. Giles remain at their property, which they do, there would never be any expansion, enlargement, or extension of the buildings or structures on the property beyond the sizes and dimensions currently there. And right now, the size of that structure is roughly 32,000 square feet. The size of the proposed new structure under this plan is 42,000 square feet. That is a 30% enlargement, and it is directly contrary to the promise made by Mr. Weisgerber and the promise that he recorded and runs with the land. If this development were to be approved and started, the covenant allows us to go in and get an injunction to stop it, and we will. Mr. and Mrs. Giles were fully in support of the initial proposal by the Weisgerbers to divide it into 3 lots for the expansion of similar homes to the rest of the neighborhood, and they still are in favor of that. And that, I think, is where this should go. And so they just wanted to let the council know that if this development were to proceed, it would likely end up being a tremendous waste of time and money for everybody because it violates that covenant. It would be stopped and you'd be right back to square one. Thank you.
Thank you very much for the comments. Who would like to be next? Anyone else like to make citizens' comments? Going once? Going twice? Is there anybody on YouTube that wanted to comment, Tom?
I'm not seeing. Hold on a second.
On Zoom?
I'm not seeing any hands up. Nope.
Okay. All right, citizens' comments are now closed. We'll move on to item number 7, the consent agenda.
Move to approve the consent agenda.
I'll second.
All right, all in favor say aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Abstentions? Passes. All right, we'll move on to number 8, board, committee, and commission reports. A, licenses. Number 1, discussion and possible action regarding the 2021-2022 alcohol beverage retail license. Tom, do you have something to chime in on that?
I don't, beyond what Molly has included in the packet.
Okay. Looking for a motion?
Yeah, go ahead.
Also move.
I'll second.
Okay. All in favor say aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Abstentions? Passes. Move on to number 2, discussion and possible action regarding the 2021-2022 cigarette and tobacco products retail license. I assume there's nothing to add to that as well?
Correct.
We'll be looking for a motion.
Also move.
Second.
Okay, you get that? Yep. All right, all in favor say aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Abstentions? Passes. All right, we'll move on to 8B, Planning Commission. Mr. Eicher.
All right, well, we did have a meeting, and a lot of the people in the audience were at that meeting. But in advance of that, you can reference the packet and the notes. One of the more significant things that we talked about, aside from the Castle Senior Living Development, was the plans for the replacement of Perkins to raise that building and have a Olive Garden restaurant start operations there. And we approved the site plan with some contingencies on stormwater management. Some things are deferred to Public Works as well as placement of a sign, but that looks like it's moving forward. So our big concern was when are they going to get started? So with that, we can move on to the second item here, which is so that's the end of my report.
End of your report? Okay.
As far as the commission goes.
Great, thank you. Move on to number 2, discussion and possible action on the following items. DLC 0782001-001-1807 Negawicka Road, owner Marati LLC, applicant Christopher Kiefer, Castle Senior Living applicant is seeking conditional use and site plan and appearance review approval to operate a community-based residential facility, CBRF, which will include the demolition of several buildings and the construction of a new building. You guys want to come on up?
Thank you for your time and service to our community. My name is Chris Kiefer. I'm a resident of Delafield, 2806 Peninsula Drive, Delafield, Wisconsin. And this is my attorney next to me, Susan Sorrentino from SBR Law Group. Just want to take a few minutes and do a presentation about our proposal to make sure you fully understand what we're proposing and also why we think you should approve it. Basically, what we're asking here for is a reasonable accommodation under the Federal Fair Housing Act. We are proposing a community-based residential facility for disabled and elderly in our community. Disabled residents are a protected class under the Fair Housing Act. They should be allowed to live on this lake like everyone else. The city zoning allows for a community-based residential facility to be on this site, and we're meeting all the requirements within the ordinance. This will benefit the community and the neighborhood in many ways, including offering disabled and elderly residents an opportunity to remain living on this lake and remain living in a neighborhood setting. The city of Delafield offers very few options for our disabled and elderly residents, and this will help satisfy a need in our community. This will help increase the city's tax base. The city has been historically running with a budget deficit and recently increased our taxes. This development will help offset the budget. When compared to the current site is a restaurant and has been a restaurant, banquet center for 40 years, and before that, a hotel, and before that, a nightclub, and it went on for over 100 years. This has been a site for the community. Our proposal will improve that site. We don't think it should be compared to single-family houses now because it's not that, and it has not been that for over 100 years. So if you look at what it's currently is right now, our proposal will increase the green space, decrease the water pollution to the lake with our stormwater management plan, decrease the traffic as proven in our traffic study, decrease the noise, decrease impervious surfaces, and decrease the intensity on the site. It will improve the surrounding property values. In fact, the two studies that we had conducted by licensed realtors indicated that it will not negatively affect property values. In fact, it may likely increase property values to surrounding properties. They have done studies with evidence-based studies with supporting evidence. What I've heard here tonight is speculation. The city has recommended denying our proposal, stating it took in consideration the impact of property values. But if our proposal will only increase property values, why would the city recommend denying it? The city has no evidence that this will decrease property values. I know Alderman Jim Barron spoke at the public hearing. He stated he is a realtor and implied that our proposed use and building will negatively impact property values. But I spoke to him after the meeting, and he told me he did not conduct any studies, did not have any evidence to support his statement. His comments were merely his personal opinions, which I appreciate. But by stating you are a realtor before that and speaking against a protected class of people with no supporting evidence, it's misleading to the public, and it does go against the Wisconsin Realtor Code of Ethics. The fact remains there's no evidence to deny a request. There really is no reason. The Planning Commission has made an inappropriate recommendation to deny our application based on their personal feelings. For example, the denial based on the size is an opinion. We personally feel that our proposal is too small for the site. We actually have decreased the size of this building 3 times to help better accommodate this concern. It's almost a 4-acre site. It's very large. The building is proportionate to the size of the lot. People keep comparing us to Heritage Senior Living on the other side of town. Our building is about 1/3 that size. The fact remains that it will not exceed the maximum floor area ratio requirement within the ordinance. In other words, the city would allow a residential house to be built this size. So why are you not allowing us? If you don't allow this, I feel like you're being discriminatory against us. The size meets the city ordinance. To say that it does not fit into the character of the neighborhood is again an opinion. The city zoning allows for a CBRF use on this site, and the building we designed will look like a high-end residential house. It will be a home for disabled residents. The Planning Commission members made some comments that they believe these types of uses should be located close to hospitals, in commercial or business district, or in agricultural districts. But that again is their personal opinions. And we feel is discriminatory because it implies that disabled residents should not be allowed the same opportunity to live on the lake like everyone else. This is the very thing we're trying to change. Our disabled residents do not want to live in the middle. They don't want to live in institutional settings next to hospitals or in commercial districts or business districts. They don't want to be isolated in the middle of nowhere in agricultural settings. They want to be part of the community where they have lived their entire lives. They want to be in a neighborhood setting and maintain a sense of independence like everyone else. Where would you want to put your mom or dad if they need help? In a place where they're staring out the window at a gas station, or where they're looking out over a beautiful lake, watching the sunsets and watching the sailboats? I want to have my attorney talk for a few minutes about the code and the zoning, and then I'll wrap it up. Thank you.
Again, I'm Susan Sorrentino, SBR Law Group. And we're representing Chris Kiefer and Castle Senior Living.
Bring the mic closer.
Pretty close.
Thank you. Yeah, I know. You have to practically kiss it. Sorry.
I can do that. I've taken a look at the proposed resolution to deny the request for a CBRF from our applicant, my client. And if this resolution is adopted, the city would be violating not only your own ordinances, you'd be violating state law, and you'd be violating federal law as well. As you all know, the property is zoned RL1. Under your zoning code, RL1 explicitly states that a CBRF is allowed as a conditional use. So at the time that the conditional use was put in under the RL1, the determination was already made that this property is appropriate for a CBRF. That's under state law, Act 67. It clearly states that at the time that the zoning was enacted, it's made at that time the use is appropriate for that district. So when it says in your RL1 zoning that a CBRF is allowed under a conditional use, to say that this area is not appropriate for a CBRF already goes against your own zoning ordinance. The conditional use permit process is to evaluate and to see whether any additional requirements need to be met. No additional requirements were put on this application, and they've met all of the current zoning requirements. Under the CBRF, or excuse me, under the conditional use ordinance, the state law, it says that if the applicant meets all the requirements, the city shall grant the conditional use permit, not may grant or will consider. The statute says that it shall grant. So this is not an optional idea. You're required to grant the conditional use permit if he meets the requirements, and he's demonstrated that he meets all of the requirements. There's been some discussion about the comprehensive plan, and that there's an interpretation by apparently the drafter of this, or the concepts in this resolution, that it doesn't, that by granting a conditional use permit, it is not consistent with the comprehensive plan. The comprehensive plan is a guide, but the zoning ordinance is a regulation. And the comprehensive guide does not trump over the conditional use permit in the zoning ordinance. The zoning ordinance, the conditional use permit is entitled to be in the zoning ordinance, and the comprehensive plan can't be twisted to overrule a conditional use permit under the ordinance. In fact, under state statutes, a conditional use permit does not even need to be consistent with a comprehensive plan. And if there are inconsistencies between the comprehensive plan and the zoning ordinance for a conditional use, the conditional use permit will prevail. So under your own ordinances denying the conditional use permit, you're required to do it, and under state statutes, you're required to do it. Under federal law, denying the conditional use permit, you must provide a reasonable accommodation if you think that it doesn't fit your ordinances. We already think it does fit your ordinances, but even if you were to believe that it doesn't, you're required under federal law to attempt a reasonable accommodation under the Fair Housing Act and under the Americans with Disabilities Act. The elderly are considered disabled and are entitled to all the rights and protections of the American Disabilities Act and the Fair Housing Act. The city must consider reasonable accommodations to allow the CBRF rather than outright denying it, regardless of any other zoning ordinances. And failing to consider any reasonable accommodations is in violation of the FHA and the ADA. So by denying the CBRF on the Seven Seas property without making a reasonable accommodation for the disabled, the city would be denying people with disabilities equal housing opportunities that are available to non-disabled people. In addition, the city had told Waukesha County that it would, in fact, take steps to further eliminate impediments to fair housing as required by the FHA. And denying the CBRF does exactly the opposite. This could open the city to potential liability, not only by violating your own ordinances, by violating state law, and by violating federal law, and entitling Chris, if he so chooses, to bring an action under federal court in federal law, under the FHA and under the American Disabilities Act. We would hope that that isn't the situation. We would hope that you would follow your own ordinances, follow state law, and follow federal law, not just outright deny this conditional use permit. Consider reasonable accommodation to try to figure out a way to make this work so that it satisfies your own intentions, because we believe it already does follow the law. With respect to the 1998 Giles Agreement, I'm very familiar with it. In fact, Attorney O'Neill and my firm have traded some correspondence with respect to that. We feel very strongly that that agreement is a red herring, doesn't apply to this property, and the terms of it have already fallen away and it is not enforceable. And we too are prepared to see that to the end. So in sum, we believe that by denying this conditional use permit, violates your own ordinances, violates state law, violates federal law, and we would hope that you would find a way to make an accommodation if you feel it's needed and grant this conditional use permit, even though we don't believe accommodation is even needed because we've already met all the requirements and any conditions that have been placed. Thank you.
I've got a question.
Sure.
When Chris spoke, he used the word disabled resident, and you used the word people with disabilities, and then you said elderly, so I'm a little confused, because my understanding was that the proposal was for individuals that wanted to enjoy the lake, but there was no skilled nursing care. And in fact, if anybody needed skilled nursing care, they had to be removed from the property. These were for self-sufficient individuals. So I just want to clarify. You're saying that
That's a good question.
Anybody that's elderly, and what does that mean? Am I elderly?
I don't know if you are.
I mean, what does that mean? I'm unclear.
That's a fair question.
Brought up.
In a medical setting, I'm going to let Chris respond to it with respect to a medical setting. With respect to the federal, the Fair Housing Act in the Americans with Disabilities, elderly people fall within a category of being disabled. Whether or not they fall within a category medically, I don't know. But there are federal cases in which elderly fall into disabled for federal law purposes.
Right, but what I want to know is that what you're saying here, that the, and we're not, I don't advise the council that whether the Fair Housing Act and the American Disability Act applies, really isn't, I don't think, a factor here as far as the CU, but I just want to know myself. Are you saying that anybody that's elderly is disabled? And if so, what is the definition of elderly?
Under numerous cases, Oconomowoc Residential Programs Incorporated, in which it was determined that the CBRF for elderly, by failing to provide reasonable accommodation in granting conditional use permit, violated the Fair Housing Act and the Americans with Disabilities Act, because the elderly, although I don't think they provided a definition, but they specifically cited these particular circumstances. That's Oconomowoc Residential Programs versus City of Milwaukee. Another Oconomowoc Residential Programs versus City of Greenfield said that statutes limiting meaningful access to housing by disabled persons were preempted by the ADA and the Federal Housing Act.
I understand that, but like you just said, it's the facts of every case. Like, for example, as you mentioned, the city approved a facility for the elderly, that Heritage facility, which is 3 times the size of what's being proposed here. But I just want to know, if you can tell me, are you saying that these statutes apply because anyone that's elderly is disabled, and if so, what is elderly?
Under the Civil Rights Act, and I'm quoting from the Civil Rights Act 1968, elderly residents of, that was referenced in this case, elderly residents of proposed community-based residential facilities are handicapped persons for whom reasonable accommodations are required by FHA.
Right, handicapped persons.
I think that's it.
Okay, thank you.
Can I just add to that? Our proposed community-based residential facility will be serving the handicapped and disabled. It's an assisted living facility that offers 24-hour support for those individuals.
One of the lines of the questioning, I know from in the Plan Commission meeting, and some of the thoughts that were expressed, was a reaction to the size of the facility as well as the number of residents. But in particular, one of the commissioners brought up, a 43,000 square foot facility would be the equivalent of, 3 14,000 square foot homes. And part of the point that he was making was that that seems out of character for the types of homes that are in that neighborhood. And so following, and I don't know that there was much of a statement of objection to that because there's not a lot of 14,000 square foot homes along that row. I think one of the people that talked earlier's home is probably about 3,500 square feet immediately adjacent to the property, and to the north I'm not sure how big. But so following that line of thought, I asked you if a smaller number, I don't know what I threw out, if it was 16 or 20 residents would be a facility that would be, I mean, clearly it would scale more appropriately to the character of the neighborhood. And we have similar facilities in the city that are in similar residential neighborhoods that are both CBRFs here at Clearview as well as Rogers. And Rogers is a bigger lot with 24 homes, 24 residents. Is that something, I mean, I was kind of hinting at a reasonable accommodation for maybe scaling this down to be more in keeping with the character of the neighborhood. And
Yeah,
I'm wondering what, you know, at that time you said, no, that wouldn't work, but
Correct.
what does work?
Can I take that?
Yeah.
But his application does comply with your ordinances with respect to size. And if you are going to put any restrictions or requirements on, any restrictions or requirements need to be tied to substantial evidence and reasoning as to why they're needed.
Well, that's part of what like I said, part of the logic was that was flowing through the thought of multiple commissioners was what is the character in the neighborhood? What would detract from the enjoyment of the neighboring residents for the use of their property? Saying why am I looking at this gigantic facility that's a commercial property when everyone else has little homes? So that's kind of the line that we were following, and so I was more or less asking why, or if a smaller scaled facility would work. You said no, but I don't know what. So.
We already scaled it down 3 times from my initial proposal back in January.
We weren't asked to act on anything but what was presented to us.
Sure, I'm just kind of
meeting.
explaining the history of how I got here. I started with a much larger building because of the concerns, scaled it back, met with the city again. They came with the concern I could not use the lot across the street in my FOIA ratio calculation. I took that off, scaled the building back down in size, and here we are. So to answer your question, the other neighboring properties, there are large homes on that side of the lake, mansions, and as I mentioned last time, their lot size is not as big. So their house in scale looks bigger, and they're right next to, their setbacks are 10 feet. They're right next to their neighbor house. And so when you put all those houses together, it looks like a big conglomerate of houses when you're going down the street, as opposed to my proposal. It's set way back from the road. I believe it's 300 feet. Other houses are right up close to the road. So when you're looking at it, it's a 2-story building. Again, it's a third of the size of Heritage. It's 2 stories. It's going to look like a high-end home. Again, set way back from the road, and the side setbacks are much larger, 3 times as large as the neighboring property. So it's going to look proportionate to the size of the lot.
I get that, but some of the supporting infrastructure too, parking lots, the parking lot lights, you don't get that with a residential home, and this is a community-based residential facility. So that's part of the character analysis was, is this a home? Is this a residence? And it does appear to be more of a commercial enterprise institution than a residential facility, right? So that's some of what I gleaned from the discussion we had in the Plan Commission, and that's why I'm asking if a smaller facility would work. Not what was kicked around before the proposal.
Sure, it would
but
not. Yeah, this is the smallest as we can go, feasibility-wise.
I mean, I'm fascinated that a place with no access, my mom's in a CBRF in Madison, by the way, so I'm very familiar with the alphabet soup. And the thing that is utilized by the folks in her Brookdale site on Madison West is the access to sidewalks, the ability to go into the community, to the little libraries nearby, and none of that exists. So I'm fascinated with the fact that a CBRF is going to construct $1 million lakefront property. Now, ideally, wow, that's great, but that's a really expensive piece of real estate. Who's going to get those little apartments? It doesn't strike me as the best plan for the residents. I think they would be better served. Personally, observing my own mom's experience, and many of her, because she's 87, a lot of her friends are in a similar situation, but they are near one another, their kids are nearby, and they can walk to, let's say, the Delafield Library. Why that spot just seems so incongruent to what serves older folks.
The business financial plan really is not what is being evaluated here tonight. I believe we're asking for approval on a conditional use permit. Clearly, Chris's lender has analyzed the financials and believes it's worthwhile. And it's not the city's
So it's none of my business to ask the question? Is that what you're saying?
No, and what I'm saying is that it's not a factor that is authorized by law to be evaluated in determining whether or not you're going to grant the conditional use permit.
Gotcha. Not by law, but maybe by logic. So I'll let you have that.
To answer your question, the sidewalks, we are putting sidewalks around the building, so there is ample room to walk around outside. We're also...
But you can't access anything from there, except the building itself. So that's my question. So
Well,
you can move on. Others will have other
I have
questions.
I have a question. So you said your mother's in a CBRF in Madison.
Yep.
How often does she walk to the library?
How often does she walk to the library? Once a week.
Once a week?
Uh-huh.
Okay. So we do take our residents out. We do have
you
outings.
schlep them on a bus. I mean, I know the deal. It just, that was just my question, but I'm sure others have other questions.
Not all residents want to live downtown in a commercial district. Like I mentioned, they want to be in a residential setting, looking out on the lake. Like you mentioned, it's a beautiful setting. A lot of residents want to be there, and we'll offer ample opportunity to go to the library and into the community, to get ice cream and have outings.
I have a question for the city attorney and for the Plan Commission relevant to the 1988 Giles Agreement. Why is that, or is that not an impediment to this development?
Well, I've looked at the agreement too, okay? And that's a private contract, right?
Jim, you got to bring your mic up closer to your mouth.
I turn this.
Yeah, you got to hold it up.
I turned it off.
Super
Turn
tight.
it off so everybody, when I'm not speaking. Yeah, I looked at it as well, but it's a separate contract between private property owners, and Mr. Giles and his counsel believe that it's valid and enforceable, and that they can't proceed with this even if approved. Susan Sarantino believes the contrary. That's private contract right. I mean,
So this would be, Giles would have standing to go after Weisgerber, but not the applicant?
Well, if it runs with the land, as it does, if there was a sale, Mr. Giles could seek to prevent the construction even if a conditional use permit were granted. But that's a private contract, right?
But it doesn't have anything to do
Has
with
nothing
our
to do, nothing
decision
to do
over it.
with your evaluation approval.
Thank you.
And I'll just state, to the best of my recollection during the deliberations in the Plan Commission, that was not raised as a potential issue that we were concerned with. And maybe somebody heard or saw something different than what I experienced, but I don't recall weighing in on any potential property assessment values as being as a part of our decision. It was really focusing on the character of the building, the size and scale as related to the surrounding properties and what that impact would be aesthetically on the neighbors. And that's one of the things that we do take into consideration on conditional uses. And maybe it's not, maybe it doesn't apply, but you gave some perspective on how we should be using our comprehensive plan in our decisions. I believe you used the term "I think" or whatever, but I disagree with your opinion on that. I mean, I find that if we consistently violate the intent of our comprehensive plan as it comes to all the work and all the sentiment that went into it, that it does devalue the integrity of how we apply our zoning laws to conditional uses and how we look at the little discretion that we have in these cases, and how we can try to work with the applicants to come up with something that does fit in and is of appropriate character. So I think the comprehensive plan and the spirit and all the intent that's in there is really it's what's behind the zoning code and anyways, but not that. I recognize they're different documents, but still, when we look at conditional uses, the impact on the neighboring property is a huge part of what we need to take into account, and that's where most of our discussion came down to, and the recommendation to the council to deny it came from, in my opinion.
But the Giles contract and what you heard tonight from both Mr. O'Neill and Susan, both of that information was presented to the Plan Commission. But at the same time, we said Plan Commission shouldn't take that into consideration making its recommendation.
And they didn't.
They didn't, right.
Thank
It's not the first time it came up.
Okay, thank you.
I have a couple of comments too. I'm of the opinion that if you're following all the rules and you're doing everything, that you should have the right to do what you want with your property. So looking at it through that filter, I've really tried to look at, does this really fit with the zone, our zoning and our master plan? And unfortunately, I'm still new here, so I've been doing a lot of reading on our zoning codes and our master plan, and they're very intertwined. Our zones over and over again says in keeping with our master plan, in the spirit of our master plan. And it's very clear that our residential, especially our lake residential zones, we want to keep the character of the neighborhood. And I do believe that a CBRF is a residential home. However, this building isn't. This is a facility. It doesn't look like a home. The parking lot, nothing about this says home to me. If I'm driving past this, I'm not going to mistake that for one of the neighboring homes. Some of your other CBRFs, I would. Your building the other buildings look like a house. You could mistake it for a house. If that was the case here, I would have no problem approving it. I don't have any issue with having a CBRF at that location, but this proposal doesn't fit with the neighborhood and the character of the neighborhood. And that's my struggle with it. I had one more thing, and I'm trying to see. My other big concern is if your business were to fail, this building would be, that is a concern for me, even if it met all of and was in fitting, nothing else could happen with this building. And that's a big concern for me. So.
Thank you. I'll just make a couple comments. Speaking about the character, that really is your opinion, and we're trying to stick to facts.
Right, but our conditional use, having a conditional use, and is it in keeping? That's what we're deciding. Is it an opinion? Does this fit? When it says, does it fit in with you're right, it's right. Totally opinion. But the opinion of the entire, almost the whole neighborhood, and many others have that same opinion. So if
But there's
the
a lot of
opinion
people that
the
don't. Look,
community-
I've spoke to a lot of people, and they think this is a great location, great site. Can't wait for it to be up. You know, they feel it does fit into the neighborhood, and so it's really an opinion, and we're trying to stick to facts, and that's why I look at the floor area ratio calculation. I say we are meeting that. The size of the building is acceptable to the city. The city has those restrictions because they don't want too big of a building built, and we are under that, and so therefore that's the fact, right? So the building does fit, it's proportionate to the lot size.
Well, here's a fact. Chapter 7 of our comprehensive plan says we should discourage commercial use in predominantly residential neighborhoods. Fact, preserve the character of existing residential neighborhoods. You're saying we should ignore our own comprehensive plan?
But the city allows the CBRF to be in this zoning.
And we're not saying we don't want a CBRF there. We're saying we don't want this building.
That's the
This
same
plan.
thing.
It's not. It's not. If you came to us with a different plan that looked like residential homes, we would be having a different conversation.
So
And I
are you
believe you'd
saying
have a
that if
different-
we,
and I believe you'd be having a different reaction from the community as well.
so are you saying that if we change the roof line, it would be more acceptable?
I think, no.
No, I think.
What are you
No,
saying?
I wouldn't.
Look,
I would say,
having gone through the plan commission and I was the one that drafted this resolution based on the discussion and recommendation at the plan commission. And I think I brought it up then, but if not, if there were 3 lots approved for this property, land division. If
It was approved by the planning commission,
Pardon?
sir. It was approved by the planning commission,
Right,
didn't
it's
go
been
to common
recommended-
council.
It was hasn't been submitted to the council. But assuming that were submitted and approved, if you or any other individual came in with 3 single-family homes with each one being a 8-unit CBRF or less, they could go on there without any approval at all. Right? I mean, you know that, we agree with that, right? I mean, that's fact. But
Well,
there
it
you're
needs to
dealing-
comply
there you're
with the
dealing- pardon?
ordinance. But they need to comply with the ordinances.
If you have 8 or less units, you don't need a CU. So the point, and this is what I think what Mr. Aker was raising in discussion of the plan commission, you would end up with 24 units total on a CBRF, but here the request is for a 42,930 square foot building with 57, is it?
57 beds.
57,
yeah.
I thought it was 54, 57 units.
Beds.
And I think that was where the discussion was at the plan commission. I think that's the comments that were just made reflected that. I'm not, council ultimately makes a decision. I'm just trying to articulate, what I believe to be the issue from the recommendation of plan commission, the discussion tonight. It's not that ACBRF, it is a conditional use, but it's, if you said, you know, I want a 42,930 square foot building, but I'm going to not make the units smaller and I want 75 units in there, not 57. Are you saying that, well, you would have to approve that because it's a conditional use? That's what it was suggested. Is there some other a proposal with lesser number of units, lesser size of building, different configuration at work? And the answer is no, which comes back to the question of whether or not there are any conditions that could be imposed that would address these concerns, and it appears to me not.
Well, when he had submitted a plan previously, he was told that it was too large. And so he came back and revised in order to appease and to comply with the requirements. And so then that's what he's done.
But you're referring to discussions that were at staff level, at what staff thought, not was ever presented publicly to the plan commission.
When he came in February, he was proposing having a restaurant and the CBRFs.
Right.
In fact, there were plan commission members who have said on record that if the restaurant wasn't there, I could approve this CBRF. Consequently, so Chris viewed that as a requirement that he was putting on. He was trying to accommodate what the comments were. So Chris removed the restaurant and revised the plan so that it could be approved. And then he came before.
That was a cursory just opinion. What do you think about this? There was no action taken there other than just feedback from the commissioners. And one commissioner did have an opinion about the noise and hectic atmosphere that a restaurant might impose on seniors. But just like you're saying, we're not supposed to be concerned about your business plan. Why would you concern yourself with an opinion about what seniors like as far as hectic restaurant environment? You know, you can't have it both ways. But so we had the Plan Commission had nothing actionable until May, and we acted based on what we were given, and some of the feedback in the give and take was, would a smaller facility work that didn't present itself as an institution as opposed to a residence? It's really where the essence of it was, and we're hearing again that no, smaller doesn't work. So we're not sure where to go with it. You know.
I don't disagree that it wasn't until May that the formal application was heard before the Plan Commission. It was an informal meeting to get feedback, and he took that feedback seriously because he wanted to accommodate the concerns of the Plan Commission members. So I think Chris has done the financial analysis, and correct me if I'm wrong, but this is what, for this type of property, what he needs to make this work. And we're asking for the Common Council to approve it based on it.
But you're referring, under our zoning code and our practice, applicants can come in and ask for conceptual approval. That's
Yes.
what you were talking about when,
Yes.
and you got feedback, and that was after that the application was then submitted, and the restaurant facility was eliminated, and the size of the building was changed, and so on. And that's what was presented to the Plan Commission, okay? So the conceptual discussions and who may have said what at that time really are not part of what we have in front of us tonight, or what this council has remembered. So.
Hey, Chris, did you have something you wanted to do to kind of wrap up your proposal, or?
I just want to say that I want Delafield to have a reputation of caring for our elderly and disabled and offering great options. This is going to be a great option. I don't want Delafield to have a reputation of discriminated against or having, limiting their choices. There's a lot of individuals out in the Lake Country area that want to have their mom and dad stay living in the lake. Like I mentioned, watching the incredible views, going on pontoon boat rides, and living out their final days in this setting. And I want, it's going to put the city of Delafield on the map when it comes to offering this type of environment. It just is. You don't, there's so many in different cities, there's places in commercial districts, Walmart outlots, and it's just not the best. So we want to be unique, we want to offer great opportunities, great choices, and it's really going to help the city. So I just ask that you please make a motion to approve our application. Thank you.
All right, are there any other questions for the applicant? If none, we'd be looking for a motion.
I move to approve Resolution 2021-11, resolution denying conditional use permit for a community-based residential facility.
Second.
All right, is there any discussion? Hearing none, all in favor say aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Abstentions? Motion passes. Alrighty, we will move on to item C, Lake Welfare Committee. Bill?
Thank you very much. You can hear me okay?
Gotta talk a little bit more.
Okay. Can you hear me okay now? Though I was unable to be present at the meeting last week, there are 3 points worth noting. The first of which is that Lakeland biologists have chemically treated areas of the lake for invasive species, and the Lake Welfare Committee will be requesting in the budget of next year for $19,000 for the same treatment. Second item that was approved was 2 boathouses, which will be constructed in the lake. And thirdly, in lieu of the monthly Lake Welfare meeting in July, we will be having the annual Lake Welfare meeting, which we did not have last year because of COVID. That will be on July 14th from 6 until 8 p.m. It'll be held at the Nagawicca Lake Yacht Club. Postcard invitations will be sending out soon. And on the agenda, there'll be guest speakers, including our own police department, specialists on invasive species, and the unveiling of, yes, the Sewer Packs Lake Management Plan.
Woo-hoo.
Several years later. That's it.
Sounds good. Thank you very much. Alrighty, we'll move on to D, Park and Recreation Commission Tree Board. Mr. Grimmer.
I'll start with the tree board. A couple quick things. The right-of-way request for tree plantings has been suspended by a vote of the tree board based on the dwindling funds in the tree fund as of June 1st. So that program is temporarily suspended. The second thing...
Just on that, have we communicated that to staff so we can update the website so that we make sure it says temporary suspended or something, just so we don't get applications? Because I know it's kind of a popular site.
Yep, I can do that. The second thing is I believe if folks are familiar with Blue Collar Coffee, the Bark River, and the dumpsters in front of the river there, Park and Rec and Tree Board have been working hard to kind of put a little nicer shine to that area. And so we're going to be planting some trees to screen those dumpsters from the river in the future. The bids for the 2021 contracting were approved. What else? And lastly, the consideration at the next tree board meeting will be there'll be a discussion, possible action on changing the amount of the dollar amount that developers pay for cutting down trees, potentially to reflect the change in the costs over the years. And that's it for the tree board. Park and Rec. Park and Rec, the Bark River viewing platform, which is right across from the soccer field, hopefully will be installed soon. And Park and Rec will be discussing the pier at their next meeting, which is next Monday. And that's all for Park and Rec Tree Board. Any questions?
I know at one point in time when Michelle was mayor, there was discussion on the tree board to create like the city's own nursery so they wouldn't have to purchase trees. And I'm just wondering if that is maybe still a viable alternative. Some of the people on Parks and Rec should recall that, and I can ask Michelle, but it seemed like a really logical thing rather than having to purchase trees.
Was a property discussed, like within the city of Delafield?
Yeah, there was, and I can't recall where, but I know that there was a property that she had in mind, and the whole idea was not buying them anymore, but to actually raise trees.
Yeah,
I got
absolutely.
a few volunteers in my yard, too.
Yeah, there you go. Well, they're expensive. They're expensive for sure.
Yeah.
You got to water them, though.
Yeah.
That's the trouble.
Yeah.
Tom, do you have any input on that?
Yeah, I believe at one point there was some discussion about a small-scale nursery potentially on the Delafield property that we acquired. But then I do believe that there were concerns about the operation and maintenance of a nursery and whether we have staffing to be able to do that and whether it really is cost-effective to do that on our own versus to purchase nursery stock. But I don't remember it being brought to any conclusion.
There was a time when there were trees planted along the street across from the city hall. This goes back 30 years, where someone planted a bunch of them, and we did move them around for a while. And everyone said, "Oh, this was a great idea," but they were almost like volunteer trees, other than they were all in a row. Someone obviously planted them, and they grew. In fact, I think the pine trees around here were part of that. But,
Right. Great, thank you for the report. We'll move on to E, Public Works Committee. Mr. Barron.
Okay, Public Works is working on the comprehensive pedestrian and bicycle plan, trail plan, and that is a work in progress. They are attempting to get things done, by August, September. At some point, they're going to have a formal hearing with the proposal, so people will get a chance to comment. But it is trying to be structured that it's consistent across the city. And but we've had people come in and comment where trails are being discussed. So we worked with the Olive Garden folks to pre-approve anything in case the Plan Commission they were ahead of schedule by being in Public Works. And there weren't really any issues that we had difficulty with. The Hawthorne Farms project was also discussed and approved. So that's the subdivision on the North Farm. And that's about it.
Great. I'll just chime in on the Olive Garden because it's come up twice. I mean, Tom, correct me if you're wrong, but the latest information I have is they're hoping to tear down the building in August. So that is their timeline, barring some kind of hiccup.
Great.
Alrighty, F, Delahart. Striker.
Yeah, we had our elections. I might have missed reporting this, but so I'm the chair again, and Mike Myers is vice chair, and oh darn it, and Irv Sadowski is our secretary. Thanks. He's not a forgettable person.
I was going to say.
And the other thing is, we survived another audit, and by that I'm being a little facetious. Rose does a brilliant job, and we're a very solvent organization, and things are looking good financially. So there's no worries about anything coming our way. That's it for Delhart.
Great, thank you. Now I'm going to presume that Police Commission, Library Board, Motion and Tourism, and Lake Country Fire and Rescue did not have a meeting.
We did, Library Board did.
Okay.
We did.
Just going by the color on my thing here.
It wasn't, but it is
Okay,
bolded on the printed copy. But yeah, no, I know there was on
Okay, Library Board.
June 8th. There are just 3 things to cover from the library. The summer reading program kicked off, and it kicked off with a bang at the end of week 1. There were 420 registered readers, everyone from little toddlers, I'm sure they didn't register themselves, to adults. Those interested in signing up can come to the library or go online. Also, we have some in-person programming starting back. They have tech classes, story time, children's performers, among others, many of which are taking place in the garden area. So you can also check online or in the library for more information on that. And finally, the library strategic plan was reviewed at the last library board meeting on June 8th. While the plan itself spans the entirety of 2021, the board decided to roll the plan into 2 years, so into 2023, due to the pandemic and all the complications involved therein. Many things were already accomplished. The additional time allows us to focus on what needs may have shifted post-pandemic, and that's it for now.
Great, thank you. Motion and Tourism, Mr. Barron?
They did not have a meeting due to a quorum issue.
Oh, okay. Lake Country Fire and Rescue?
We had a meeting on the 27th, a good billing month in April. We always have a delay in collections, and so those collections are starting to catch up. And then revenue is catching up as expected, so that's a positive. Expenses are catching up as well, but our expenses, if you do look at our budget, our expenses are front-loaded as well in the year. The second thing is because of our consolidation, we are contracting with an organization to provide more services under one roof, so kind of achieving economies of scale with the additional municipalities and getting a better deal on some of our maintenance. And then the last thing is the ladder truck is under repair. It was gone for a week. It should be back by now. About 4,000 to 6,000 in repairs, I believe. Corrosion, yada yada. I think it's scheduled for replacement in the coming years. And that's all there is. Next meeting is this Thursday.
Great, thank you very much. Alrighty, number 9, Mayor's Report. Discussion and possible action on the following items. Number 1, accept resignation of Tom Henning from the Police Commission.
I'll so move.
I'll second.
All in favor say aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Abstentions? Passes. Item number 2, Mayor's Appointments. Wayne Dean is the alternate to Delahart, and Michelle Dio. She's back.
She's back.
To the Police Commission.
Do you need a motion on those two?
I do.
I'll make that motion.
Second.
I'll second.
Oh.
Alrighty. All in favor say aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Abstentions? Passes. Okay. Discussion possible action on the following items. Approval of the voucher payable report for reporting dates 5/21/21 to 6/10/21 in the amounts of $263,112.93 for accounts payable and $7,641.78 for payroll.
I move to approve the voucher list.
I'll second.
All right. All in favor say aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Abstentions? Passes. All right. Number 11, reports of city officials. Mr. Administrator.
Yeah, a few quick updates. I'm sure most people are aware, but the Lake Nagawicca fireworks are coming up. The date is Saturday, July 3rd at dusk, with the rain date of Monday, July 5th. Number 2, Phil had mentioned in his report that Sewer Pack is finally done with the lake management report. It's a very hefty report, several years in the making.
That's what
it is. I've got extra hard copies if anybody's interested in a copy of it. We will also make sure it gets onto the website for people that prefer reading it that way.
I've actually read portions of it. It's really fascinating.
And then, Sewer Pack will have a representative at that Lake Awareness meeting on July 14th to give a formal presentation that covers the report. And then lastly, just want to give you an update on the city's economic development planning efforts and the focus group meetings. They have met 4 times. They got 1 meeting remaining. That meeting is going to be on Tuesday, July 20th. They have reviewed a preliminary cost of services study result, and there was some unique results for that for the city of Delafield. Delafield is unique in that our residential development is sustainable from a tax perspective, and going forward, as long as property values are higher per unit than the average current property value, they will only continue to improve our budget situation. So we are unique in that manner. Most communities, residential development, the cost of services is higher than the revenue generated. In addition to the cost of services study, they've reviewed the community survey results, the visual preference survey results. They've gone through an exercise of identifying areas for consideration for tweaks to the land use plan. They've reviewed those areas and provided feedback to our city planner. And now she'll come to the July 20th meeting with a menu of of options for the focus group to use to make recommendations that'll go to the Plan Commission and then the Common Council.
Which were all ideas that were generated by the committee themselves.
Correct. And that's all I have.
Great, thank you much. Okay, City Clerk, 2021 ARPA filing. We don't need a motion or anything on that, Tom? That's just there for reference?
Yeah, just to inform the council that we did do the required filing last week to qualify for that funding.
Okay, and I assume it's the same for number 2, 2021 Statement of Assessment filing.
Correct.
And then for City Treasurer, the April 21 Treasurer's Reports in the packet?
Correct.
Okay. Are there any council requests for future agenda items?
When do we pick a trick or treat date?
Can't be the same day as a Packer game.
Well, this all came up.
Are you asking that for to be on the next agenda?
I now have grandchildren who care.
It's got to be a little bit in the dark.
Yes, I said to be in the dark. I don't know what.
Halloween is on a Sunday, too. I'm just pointing that out.
That was an issue.
You gotta check the Packer game.
Who's going to make that motion? Who's desperate for reelection?
No, if it's a conflict with the Packer game, then we usually do the trick or treating on Saturday, but we'll bring a recommendation to the council at the next meeting.
Okay, good.
All right, then I will refer you to correspondence. And seeing no further business, we are now adjourned at, what time is it? 8:21. Thank you.